Well, welcome everybody. This is John Sarver, and I need to thank our sponsors, the State Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, EGLE, Homeland Solar, and we have some Homeland Solar people here tonight, Harvest Solar, Sri Energy, and Sumter Solar are all sponsoring this. And if you're not a member of GLREA, we have to uh, have you consider joining, which you can do online. It's real easy to do. Just go to our website, glrea.org. And tonight, Ben Dueweke is going to talk to us about a fairly new program, the Michigan Climate Investment Hub. And with that, just please mute yourself until Ben is done with his presentation. We should have plenty of time for Q&A after his presentation. Go ahead, Ben.
Great. Thanks, John. I've got some slides. Promise I won't read directly off of them, but if somebody could confirm they can see them, that would help.
Yep, I see him.
Good deal. All right.
It's a nice picture.
Well, thanks. Yeah, that's Newlab in Detroit, where we're located, and I'll chat a bit about that in a minute here. Yeah, John, thanks. My name is Ben Dueweke. I'm the director of the Michigan Climate Investment Hub, and we're based in Newlab. We serve the entire state of Michigan, and I'm going to chat a little bit today about sort of what the Climate Investment Hub is, what we're doing, what we endeavor to do, and hopefully how folks can receive support or how you all can help us shape systems to support people in the future. So the state has really come a long way in the last many years. And hold on just a minute, my dog's being very distracting, chewing his bone in here. All right, let's try that again. So the state set the stage for a lot of climate transition, as I don't have to tell all of you, I'm sure, between the Mildly Climate Plan and energy legislation that we saw back in 2023, and it's always been the case, but is now especially the case that we need to focus on deployment, and in order to do that, we know that there's going to need to be a lot of money in the system helping to deploy decarbonization, climate solutions, renewable energy, et cetera. The Climate Hub was really brought about in order to help to organize the system in Michigan and help to accelerate the flow of capital into all sorts of climate solutions, particularly decarbonization of buildings and the grid. I'll say capital. I've come to learn to caveat that to say that I'm just talking about money. I come from, I should have said, much as I'm sure I know a lot of you, but I started this role back in this year, April of 2025. For a dozen years before that, I was working in the energy efficiency world at Walker Miller Energy Services, doing all sorts of things, program development and design to workforce development and all sorts of things. So that's sort of my background. I've got a deep background in climate in the state of Michigan. The Climate Investment Hub was started by the state. It is, I'm not a state employee. It's not a state entity. However, it is a public-private partnership that is aiming the state of Michigan to be a priority market for climate solution investment. We want folks to bring their money here. We want there to be as many options as need to be available for folks to be able to easily access the resources they need to deploy projects. And so we're working really across a wide spectrum of stakeholders, including state of Michigan, the private investment and sort of lending world, community lenders like community development financial institutions, CDFIs, credit unions, philanthropy, local government. So I've had conversations with folks in all of those categories in the last 6 months, and will continue to do so. And really, the point is here to take a lot of disparate pieces. Uh, and help to really refine the process of getting project developers, project sponsors in front of the right kind of capital that will help them to enable their projects. So just a bit of background and structure. Again, so the state launched this, what is really the Climate Investment Accelerator, and I'll talk about that in a second. Back in November of last year, there was some press and announcement around that. It was largely as a function to help to organize and prepare the state, make it a priority state for the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. And again, I'll talk a little bit more about that. I'm sure a lot of you know, but that was the $27 billion. Solar for All was part of it. There's also the two programs that were to capitalize all sorts of banks and lenders. So $27 billion was on the table nationally. The state Office of Climate and Energy wanted to make Michigan a place where that money would flow sort of in a disproportionate way. So they set forth to set the stage for the different stakeholders that were involved in those mechanics across the country, as well as the folks here in the state of Michigan to sort of meet in the middle and nexus. So there was born the Climate Investment Accelerator. It's made up of two real arms, and really primarily I'm going to be talking about the Michigan Climate Investment Hub. But there was also the Michigan Climate Investment Fund. I shouldn't say was, because it's still being worked out. But in short, the fund was, if the hub was sort of the ecosystem organizer, and it was helping to pave the way, the Climate Investment Fund was really the carrot at the end of the way. It was $10 million that was going to come from the Michigan Competitiveness Fund, and those dollars broadly, the Michigan Competitiveness Fund broadly, is intended to help to attract federal dollars into the state of Michigan. So it's being used in various different ways to do that. 10 million of it was sort of earmarked or set aside for the Climate Investment Fund. And those dollars were in large part going to go to matching, to some extent, greenhouse gas reduction projects that came into the state of Michigan. So if some of these national coalitions came in and were developing projects, the state would be able to provide some degree of match, in addition to all of the sort of pathfinding and wayfinding, more like relationships and ecosystem that the hub was going to provide. And so together, these were going to really, again, attract a disproportionate amount of that money back into the state of Michigan. So without the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, and it is currently frozen in all sorts of litigation, as I'm sure many of you are aware. Unfortunately, the fund is currently sort of the fate of the fund was tied to the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, just the way that it was written. We're trying to figure out if that money can still be used, but suffice to say that for now, that's relatively tied up. However, the hub remains, and the hub, again, I mentioned earlier, public-private philanthropic partnership. So a number of irons in the fire here. Again, I said that Eagle was the sort of body that the hub was born out of. However, it is I myself am a employee of Five Lakes Energy, so that's my employer of record. And many of you know Five Lakes. But externally, I am the director of the Michigan Climate Investment Hub. The Kresge Foundation, in large part, is responsible for the funding of the hub, and we have that funding really through the end of next year. But it is our intent to identify additional funding and/or sustainable means of revenue to keep the hub going. And then Michigan Central, for those of you who are familiar in Detroit, the old train station. The Michigan Central is the property that includes the train station and then Newlab, which again is this building. It's sort of a mobility and advanced manufacturing with some climate as focus as well co-working type of incubator space. It's really an incredible spot. So we live up here on the third floor. We share some space with the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, but there's I think something like 200 organizations from individual startups to larger maturing companies that exist in here. So Michigan Central is, for all intents and purposes, working as a grant manager in this sort of schema here. That's just a graphic on the Michigan Competitiveness Fund. Again, I won't get too into that right now. All right, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but this is sort of a refresher. There's a lot of text on the slide, but the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, it was that $27 billion that I said was in large part the impetus for the Climate Investment Accelerator. Was broken down into these 3 programs. Solar for All was 7 of it. The other 2, totaling $20 billion, was those were meant to effectively capitalize green banks and community lenders. So providing them with low cost capital so that they could then go lend it out at still low cost relative to like market rates, and thereby enabling more projects to get off the ground. So that was sort of the structure. These were, it went from the federal government down to a handful of awardees. Each of those awardees was then going to go and work with a large network of community lenders. So the idea with the hub was that we would be attracting some of these awardees to, seat their folks here in Newlab with us, and then, be able to sit with their peers, do what they need to do regionally, but also have a focus in the state of Michigan. I'll speak briefly to these. This is sort of the way that now we're talking like the actual mechanics of the hub and the sort of day-to-day. This is evolving. Like I said, we've been really working hard over the last 6 months to sort of get established, and obviously a lot has changed since I started in April. Many things that I think a lot of us saw coming but hadn't happened yet, namely the freezing of GGRF in all of its forms, the tax credits, things like that. But and maybe a word on that real quick. Despite all of that, and you may be thinking at this point, well, without any of those programs, what are you left to do? I think all of us know that with or without federal subsidy, this work that we are all doing needs to get done. And so we are still here to organize and to figure out really how we make money work for us. And I think it's going to require a lot of like mindset shifting. And I know it did for me. And it happened quickly because it's my day-to-day now. A lot of folks have been, used to working with grants and subsidies, at least in part, and at least for the time being, those are going to be fairly scarce. And so there are, we believe, hopefully, ways that we can make projects work and make projects pencil on paper using finance. And that's what we are endeavoring to do. And to put an optimistic punctuation on that, the fact that Michigan is continuing to do this work, we're working with folks nationally, and there really is no other purpose-driven entity like the Climate Investment Hub that is so focused on organizing this ecosystem. And what that means is 2 things. One, it's going to start working. We're going to see benefit from this. I know it. I'm just basing my job on this. But also, 2, if and when, again, optimistically, we do see more federal funds come in and the landscape changes, we will be ever more prepared. And I think it will position ourselves well among, again, among that leading edge of states working on climate work. So that was sort of my soapbox for the job. I'll spend, what am I at? About 20 minutes. I'll go another about 10 minutes, John. Does that sound good? Okay. All right. So the mechanics of what we're doing, this is how we've broken it down. We're in the midst of some strategic planning going into next year, but this has helped to serve as a framework for the work we've done thus far. So there's 3 sort of pillars of work. The first one is to educate and convene stakeholders. That's exactly what we're doing right here, right? We're talking to people, we're helping to let them know that this is the work that the hub is doing, but also helping to sort of socialize this mindset of working within the finance ecosystem and understanding, how are we going to deploy this, all of this solar or what have you. So we're talking to folks, we're learning from folks, we're hoping that we're educating some folks along the way as well. And then we're also convening people, so not just industry groups and sort of communities of practice like the one that I'm on now with all of you, but also groups of lenders, or for example, the CDFI Coalition of Michigan and the Detroit CDFI Coalition. Right, they've got climate committees, both of them, that are focused on, hey, how are we going to, and CDFIs, if y'all are unfamiliar, they're basically community banks. They will lend to folks and businesses and initiatives that might not otherwise be deemed creditworthy to, national lenders. They have, they have much more technical support, handholding, and assistance. They do a lot of things like housing and economic development, especially in distressed areas. And quite frankly, it's shocking to me that CDFIs have not heretofore been more explicitly involved in climate, but here we are, right? Because as you all know, those initiatives that I just mentioned and more tie directly back to the work that we're doing. So they're a natural stakeholder that in all of my years, especially working with Walker Miller, like I had never really interfaced with them. So I love that. That excites me. So that's pillar one. Pillar two is identifying and aggregating projects and capital. This is kind of what I think is like the meat and potatoes of the work here. We're indexing projects on one hand, and we're indexing lenders and types of programs and ways to access capital on the other side. And we really want to build this pipeline of investment ready. And what that means is an evolving, it means different things to different people at different times, but broadly speaking, investment ready, clean energy and climate related projects, and bring forth this network of capital providers, whether that's Michigan Saves or the CDFI Coalition or all of these other credit unions, what have you. We want to index all of them. We want to know who they are, what they're trying to do, so that we can help to build the system that helps them nexus. And then that dovetails really into the last one, which is sort of to some extent matchmaking, facilitating deployment. So really just making sure that the right capital providers can talk to the right project developers and sponsors, and that they know how to talk to each other and that they know what to expect when they're talking to each other. Some of that will be a little bit more, hand in glove, I think, and some of it will be, I hope, because it's really just me. I work with other folks at the state, but like as far as the hub employees, it is just myself. I can't physically, my capacity, handhold that many projects. So ideally, we'd like to create systems and organize resources around this matchmaking process. And inevitably, I work myself out of a job, at least in this respect. That is to say, people know where to go, and there are systems in order and capacity in order for folks to be able to plug into these systems. I'm going to skip that slide altogether because I think this is really an important one. So this slide speaks to that identify and aggregate projects and a pillar of work. And this is why this is really why we find that interesting and really important rather. When we can speak to large volumes, aggregate projects, indexes of projects in a city basis or regional basis, or even a type of technology basis, it signals market demand, which again, I don't have to convince any of you that there is market demand out there for this type of work, but the lenders, it's a different story. We're still, this is still not run-of-the-mill technology to a lot of folks, and therefore there's less competency out there for things like underwriting. And so when we can show that there is volume and that there is demand, it signals that, and it helps them to know that they need to start investing in these types of capacities. Secondary, it reduces the perceived risk. Again, I think that you all know that these are not risky projects, right? But when you've got 100 projects that is in a portfolio, let's say, that is inherently feels better and makes the bankers feel a lot more warm and fuzzy than a one-off project or a two-off. And so there's confidence building there. Ideally, that allows that capital to come in at a more reasonable, rate and terms and things like that. And then lastly, it enables programmatic investment, which I think is there's the most opportunity for creativity here. So, programmatic investment could be something as basic as, and not basic necessarily, but hey, instead of one house of worship, we've got 5. And, I think Jen Solar Faithful's on here. five going in front of now and packaging that up in one loan, you're reducing your fee costs. You're reducing a lot of costs that are so soft costs that are associated. You may be able to negotiate better interest rates and things like that. You do that on a larger programmatic scale, you might be able to convince some philanthropy to put in some of their program related investment into it, continue to lower interest rates, continue to widen the net as to who's, available audience to take advantage of this. So it's really about fortifying this project pipeline, and I think that's where we're going to be calling on you all. There are some ways that we're thinking about to sort of do. I know nobody, a lot of people. There's a lot of like form fatigue and data entry fatigue. So we're being very cautious about not just doing like a broad RFI and call for projects, but there probably will be something like that in the near future. And you all can understand that this is why. This is one of the reasons we're doing that. And then lastly, I'll close with just like an example collaboration. Unfortunately, it's a little out of date, but I think it stands as a very useful tool to understand like, okay, but what are you actually doing, Ben? So back a few months ago when the state had announced the Solar for Savings Challenge, which was the Solar for All pilot program, the hub, who's working closely with the Office of Climate and Energy, they were receiving their applications, making selections for these awards. These awards were almost entirely or entirely for recipients who were non-taxable entities and therefore eligible for the direct pay or the elective pay, which is all well and good. And so the awards from the Solar for All program, Solar for Savings, were only going to provide 70% of the project cost, with the understanding that folks would be able to pick up the additional 30% in direct pay. It helps the state stretch their dollars, right? And it takes advantage of the federal money. Well, what the gap there is that those projects, to some extent or another, would probably need that bridge loan in order to cover that 30% until they were interconnected, and then the next tax cycle came around and they got that check from the federal government. As some of you may know, Michigan Saves has a bridge loan product right now, an ITC bridge loan product. They had $1 million in capital for that product. They still have a little bit left, as far as I know. So if that's something you're looking for, contact them, or me, I can get you to them. But we had the state, by the time the 12 or 15 awards that were made on paper were made, there was something like $2.5 to $3 million worth of bridge loans that would have been required. So Michigan Saves, and we love them, we work very closely with them, they simply didn't have the capital to do that, right? So we were taking it upon ourselves to meet with all of the awardees and then start to interface with some of these lenders and capital providers that even as early as mid-August had started to interface with and say, hey, look, we've got, and it ties back to this last slide. We've got 15 projects. The state is covering 70% of the cost. All we need is 30% for the bridge loan. It's as safe as you can get. This is very state money. They've got it in hand. Risk is low. Can we connect you with these projects? And that was the intent, was to connect all of those individual projects with bridge loans, therefore supporting those projects, maximizing the state's dollars, and ultimately, I think, like providing a really nice use case for the hub. So that's a nice example in a bow. And I'm right about it at my time, which is great. So that's my email. We don't have a website yet. I've got a LinkedIn. You can find that, and I'll drop that in the chat in a minute here. And we're continuing to work. There are some other mechanics and things that I didn't mention, and I'm happy to chat more with folks. Some of you on this call I've met with and I'm working with. I'd be remiss if I didn't shout out the Homeland, only because I owe them both an email. So sorry, Larry and Dave. I will get back with you. But yeah, John, everybody, I'll leave it at that. Maybe it'll open up for questions for now.
Yeah, why don't you stop the screen sharing, and it'll be easier for us to see people raising their virtual hands. As most of you know, you can go down to, well, there's Charles with the first one. Actually, let me take the first question, which is, Ben, the climate investment, of course, covers a lot of different areas. Do you have kind of short-term and long-term priorities that, for whatever reason, you're going to focus in on? And maybe eventually get around to everything, but I'm thinking that, what your kind of immediate priorities might be.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's not being particularly explicit about it, but kind of implicitly building decarbonization, renewable energy deployment, uh, electric vehicles, electrification, I think generally speaking. And let's put it this way, things that have more sort of like a tangible ROI, because that's really going to be helpful to this whole construct, right? Conservation and other type of sustainability and climate things, while I'll still and always be a champion of that work, like it's harder to make work within the financial system. And so if there's a project that involves some degree of savings or revenue generation, then there's likely a way that we can make it work. And and on the other side of that, there's also a lot of, there is a nice system sort of set up around energy efficiency, at least, and as far as other potentially stackable programs and things. So we hope to be able to be additive to that world, or even things like the low income housing tax credit. That's an energy efficiency play ultimately through an affordable housing lens. So working with things like that. But no, I would say probably not any individual single family. Because that's just like, volume bang for your buck type of thing. But, programmatic investments in single family, potentially multifamily, commercial, large commercial, grid scale solar, you name it.
Okay, that's helpful. Charles, go ahead.
Let me just lower my hand. This is this. I don't know if this is maybe some information for you, Ben. This is this news is hot off the press. Yesterday, I spoke with. I've been in corresponding with the Archbishop of Detroit. They're doing major planning of restructuring of parishes and stuff, and I've been arguing and making a case through help of Jennifer and others that if you don't factor in energy and also in terms of the teaching of the Catholic Church, it doesn't make sense. It's and that you can parishes can be much more viable, and I've given some examples of success stories over the years where they were in verge of closing, but because they reduced their energy so much and somewhat even the renewables, they're still thriving today. Um, and so I got the word yesterday that because of the stuff I've been forwarding to the Archbishop, it's been passed along to these other folks. Talked to one of the folks that are in the big planning of this other kind of restructuring issue. That yes, it is going to be it is going to be integrated. That energy is going to be part of it. This is going to be big. It's going to impact possibly every parish in the Archdiocese of Detroit. So I just wanted to give you an early heads up that maybe I know the guy I spoke with, his name, the CFO is one of that planning group of the Archdiocese, Michael Shanley or something. But just you may just I know when you want to do a cold call sometime, but just give you a heads up that there may be something there because they were looking also for talking about ways they would be funding and at least the beginning with energy audits or any other kinds of upgrades and where those resources may come and if there could be some partnerships that's I don't know, but this is very news. This is as of yesterday, so I'm just passing that on to you, Ben, and you take it with you can do with it what you want with that information. So
Yeah, thanks. That's great to hear. And I know Jennifer from all sorts of work in the past, and Rob, and so yeah, maybe Jennifer, you and I can touch base about that. But I've been hearing some things regarding the diocese and all of that, so that's exciting, and I think that that goes back to sort of that aggregate investments and those opportunities to sort of create larger projects that lower, all of these soft costs and things like that. So great news. Thanks, Charles.
Yeah, go ahead, Lisa.
Hi, I'm currently in training to be an elective pay ambassador for one of
Hey.
the regions. And so asking about your identify projects pillar, I've just started the training, so I'm saying I know just enough to be dangerous, so bear with me.
Sure.
But as I understand it, we are looking for projects that are really already underway because of the time frame of this thing. Do you know, have you come across any projects that may be eligible for direct pay, but they are not hooked up with it yet? They're not aware of it?
No, and if you find any, you can let us know. I will say, Lisa, that I work very closely with Cassie and Chris at the Technical Assistance Center, and that just for other folks, it's the Michigan Infrastructure Office has two dedicated resources specifically to help folks navigate direct pay, and they're doing this great ambassador program. Lisa, so good to hear that you're part of that. Um, and yeah, no, so hopefully we'll be able to work close together. And I was just on the phone with Cassie and Chris today talking about this very thing. So I'll probably talk to you soon in the future with any luck.
Okay, good. And can I
Yep.
just say, while I have everybody else, for everyone else, eh, are are people generally on this call? Do you know what direct pay is? Are you aware of any? I mean, can I just say what it is? And
Yeah,
Go
Please
ahead.
do. You're the ambassador. Yeah, let's
so
do it.
the intent of it is to get some of the federal climate money into the state of Michigan, but we're basically trying to identify renewable energy projects that are already underway or perhaps even were installed. Some of them from 2024 might still be eligible. Things that are underway in 2025 are eligible, but it's for any entity that is not a tax-paying organization, so they're tax exempt, they can get money back for these kinds of projects without having to get it in the form of taxes. They can just get it as money.
Yeah, in the same way that you would, yeah, you'd get it if you were a taxable entity. The government will cut you a check, regardless of your tax status, or if you are non-taxable. So churches and nonprofits, local units of government, things of that nature.
Right.
And Lisa, you may have mentioned this, but do you have a certain geographic area that you're going to target, or what's?
Well, I'm working in Region 9, so we have 6 counties, Washtenaw, Livingston, all those right around this area. But we're also working with the Detroit 2030 district. And basically, when we had our first training for the ambassadors the other day, they said we're all basically going to be trying to work together. So even if somebody hears about a project that's not in my region, I can point them to the people that can help from their region. So,
So you're available if I'm kind of guessing to sit down with anybody who's eligible, a city, a church, a
yeah,
nonprofit, and kind of explain what it is and help them through the
yep,
process.
yep,
Okay, that's super.
good.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Other questions or comments from folks? Go ahead, John.
Oh, you're muted, John.
Still muted.
Still muted.
Sorry about that.
All good.
Anyway, you've talked about how you're trying to target specific types of projects for raising money for investments. And you kind of touched upon this a few minutes ago when I thought I heard you say that this program is not designed for like individual households, but have you thought about trying to target different types of constituencies of people that may have something in common that we might be able to build a program around? For instance, just an example, members within, let's go back to Charles, members within a church, not the church itself, but the congregants within a church, or members within a labor union, or people within civil rights organizations. I mean, along those lines.
Yeah, so not explicitly, John. And I should caveat because you reminded me of something that I haven't put into my slide deck yet. But so the hub, so we won't, I'd mentioned the Climate Investment Fund, and how that's kind of frozen at the moment. The hub itself won't have any money. We're not going to be, loaning or lending or doing any of that ourselves. We're primarily just like an organizer of the ecosystem, trying to bring pieces together and identify gaps, and ideally, if we need to, develop resources to close those gaps. That said, I think I think that almost verges onto like the communications slash education realm of like, hey, I think how are we going to, if the messaging is it's cheaper if we do it together, then yes, I think that's an absolutely great way to go about it, right? And like how are the various ways that we can break down people who have may have an interest or may have infrastructure that they want to improve or build, what have you. But I can't think of an example directly right now, something that like that aligns direct with what you were saying.
Okay. Well, I have a few thoughts, but maybe down the road we can get together and chat.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, Ben, can you give us what's the status? I guess the term was solar for savings, the pilot projects. Have grants been issued for those projects? You talked about getting the applications in and stuff.
No, well, unfortunately, those dollars were all solar for all dollars.
Okay.
And so that was just the state, they were piloting the program in that they had not like completed their like internal programmatic plan. And so they were planning on launching the full program, I think toward the end of this year, early next year, but they had solicited, those pilot programs. They were going to just pull down from their Solar for All allocation to do that. And so unfortunately when Solar for All was frozen, so too were those projects.
So if the funding gets, I know, there's all sorts of court cases and things going on. If those funds become unfrozen, which I guess must be a possibility, or hopefully it's a possibility, are those projects then pretty much kind of ready to go? They've been selected, and probably the money would get out fairly quickly, and maybe you don't know.
I don't. I mean, I know that there was two rounds of selections. They did not finish the third round, I think, had not opened yet when the program was frozen, so they hadn't even solicited or something like that. But no, last I checked, those projects were still publicly listed on Eagle's website. You could probably search Eagle Solar for Savings awardees. But it would be my hope that those projects were picked back up, and I should say that those projects, right, those are on our list of projects that are aggregated, right? Projects don't necessarily have to be in a state where they're currently investable, and that is part of the way that we're like figuring out how to track and index things. But the fact is, all of those projects had, some degree of collaboration and coordination enough to win a grant. And to me, that's a lot of the challenge right there. So at that point, it's getting the money and doing the project, right? Sure, that's rife with, but yeah, I can't speak to the future of that program, unfortunately.
Yeah, and Clyde just asked, if money does become available, how would, community solar is a priority of GLREA, and how do you think community solar might fit into kind of the activities going on now, assuming we can get a bill passed and that money becomes available?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's probably with any luck, community solar would be an even easier thing to finance, just given the nature of sort of the cash flow of those types of projects. People expect longer term, they don't expect necessarily like an immediate payback. You're buying a part of solar. Some folks just want a little bit of it or what they can afford at that time. Versus if you want solar for your building, ideally at some point you want your bills to go down immediately or what have you. So I think because community solar projects, generally the nature of them is that they're larger. So, just general economies of scale there. And that there's more of like a broader stakeholder base. I would like to think that there's definitely a future for that. And in states where community solar is happening, for all of y'all who might be, because I know you're working a lot on this issue, if you have other states that you admire or you're looking to for inspiration in various ways, I would start digging into that and asking that question a little bit. And if you find things like, hey, how does the finance world play into enabling you all to do this, right? Did you get a loan for this? What did you do, et cetera? And if you find stuff, bring it to me. I'd be more than happy, just send it over. I'd love to learn more about that, and hopefully that'll help to enable that work here. And I should say that a lot of the Solar for All awardees, which I just put at least one link in. I think this might have been, this was round one. A lot of these awardees were residential serving community solar projects, and so they were, for example, installing. What's the one I like? The Hillsdale Board of Public Utilities installing ground mount solar at a municipal airport, and low income benefits would be provided on, I believe, the water bills, right? And so, like, that's a really creative way that the city of Hillsdale said, all right, the Hillsdale Board of Public Utilities said, well, we'll work around it, and this is how we can make this happen. So I would encourage folks to look at those and consider, if you know folks in those awardees, looking at what they were thinking about doing, because many of them were like effectively workarounds for the community solar challenges that we have here in Michigan right now.
Yeah, David Arnesti mentions in the chat that Solar Faithful is seeking smaller investors for his programs, and he has a link there where you can get additional information. And Ben, are you familiar with the Solar Faithful approach?
Yeah, I believe I am. Yeah, I'm talking to
Michigan
Rob.
Interfaith Power and Light, and
Yep.
yeah, okay.
Yep.
Other folks, questions, comments? Raise your virtual hand.
I guess I have another question. So you're not a part of state government. You've spun off. You work for Five Lakes Energy, and then Five Lakes Energy has got a grant from the Kresge Foundation to fund your position.
Yeah, effectively. And yeah, given Five Lakes like for-profit status, the grant didn't go directly to them. So it's effectively running through Michigan Central. But yeah, you got that right, John, structurally.
What I'm getting at is that, we have an important election coming up in Michigan in a year and a half. And sometimes you have to be prepared for the worst outcome. I just think that the work you're doing is so important that I wouldn't want it to be completely anchored with the state of Michigan, so that if a different governor is elected, we still need your work to carry on. So
yeah, that was as part of the strategy.
Great.
For sure.
Glad to hear it.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Marshall.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. This is exciting work. Have you ever thought about aggregating projects and pairing with community crowdfunding like Honeycomb Investment, formerly Raise Green?
I mean, the thought is only briefly crossed my mind. I don't even know about Honeycomb. I just kind of generally speaking crowdfunding. And I think it's got some parallels to what David put in the Solar Faithful opportunity for congregants to effectively crowdfund or contribute in various ways. But no, I think what I'm interested most in about that approach is that those dollars can go, whereas maybe in the past folks might have said, well, the crowdfunding has to cover 100% of the costs. I don't think it does, because I think one of the things we're trying to figure out is look at a spectrum of and kind of do these tolerance analysis of is how to what makes a project pencil. And Rob Robson, you said that I think 6% at 10 years and 6% interest at a 10-year term make a solar project pencil all day. And I was like, okay, that's like a helpful rule of thumb. But what about other things in the mix? And then that's if it's 100% financed, right? And not to get too in the weeds, but now what about if there's 30% of that money is upfront, it's equity that was provided by the congregants of a church or by a crowd fund that wanted to help to put solar on a park structure or something. And now you're only financing that other 70%. Well, now now would a different term work? Could you do, fewer years or higher interest rates? And not that we want fewer years or highest interest rates necessarily, but that might be what's available in the market. And so it's really about making what's available in the market match up with what is possible to pencil while constantly trying to put downward pressure on what's available in the market. Offer us better terms. Let's figure out how CDFIs, all of these other strategies. So long answer to a good question, Marshall.
No, it's establishing the capital stack through the braiding of funding, and that's all there through this type of investment. And I know Honeycomb they want to get into Michigan, and so project aggregation is kind of our job, and they have investors ready to go 1 to 2 million all day, potentially up to 1 to 5 million. So that's a fun opportunity we should take advantage of. That's available.
Yeah, you sound like you're at least definitely more knowledgeable about it than I am. So if you want to chat, I'd be happy to follow up with you on that one.
Yeah, that'd be fun. Sounds
Cool.
good.
This is Ben. This is a little off the topic, but I'm kind of curious. I guess you're in. I guess the building that's called Newlab, and
Yes.
I'm kind of curious. Who are your neighbors? You kind of made an indication that you got a whole bunch of different folks there. Some startup businesses and other kind of related organizations. I'm just kind of curious who's been all brought together there.
It's fascinating. I'd mentioned, so I think the sort of explicit focus that they're trying to hone in on, especially with it being, Ford is sort of over all of the Michigan Central property over there, is advanced manufacturing and mobility. And so to that end, there's a fairly well-established drone company next to us called Aerospace Link. There are sort of these low profile robots that might be used to pick up pallets in a warehouse and autonomously run them around. And so you'll see in fact, today there was a big full on lawn decoration witch mounted on top of those little autonomous robots rolling around Newlab. So it does feel a bit out of Silicon Valley. Then I just met a company yesterday called Thermoverse. They're kind of a startup that's making ceiling tiles that have a phase change material in them that absorbs waste heat as it goes up into the ceiling and is able to get redirected back into buildings. They claim between 20 and 40% savings in buildings. So that's incredible. Pearl Edison is in there. I don't know if folks are familiar with them, but they're working to streamline a lot of the electrification, especially of single family homes. And all sorts of different interesting stuff. There's folks down in the basement because there's a lot of the basement is a lot of shop areas. So there's welding and things. There's a company that's making hot swap kits to take internal combustion engine motorcycles and swap them out with electric engines. And they've got a bunch of them on display over there. So all sorts of really fun and cool stuff. So if y'all are in the area, hey, definitely take a look at the train station. But yeah, see if you can pop into Newlab for a minute.
Yeah, you're right next to the what used to be the train station, right? Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Other comments or questions that folks have? We got about 8 minutes left, but
I have another question. Have you had any discussions with any local units of government and how they could put money in and maybe in a variation or maybe another public-private partnership? And what I'm thinking is whether some of the more wealthier counties in Michigan, whether if they could set up a revolving fund where they would be willing to put out some taxpayer dollars, create a revolving fund, give out loans to people, and maybe match them with credit unions or Michigan Saves or something along those lines. I mean, if those thoughts crossed your desk, I'm sure they probably have.
Yeah, absolutely. Really, there's a lot of opportunity when you start to think about that, and sort of underpinning that concept is the fact that local units of government are able to go out for bonds, and bonds are basically some of the lowest cost capital that you can possibly get, long term, very low interest rate. Whether a city wants to go out for that, or maybe they need to, needs to be done by consensus, by a vote of some sort. So it could be challenging, but there are a lot of different interesting ways that people are thinking about it. I'll give you all one really interesting, for instance, that I hope we can explore in Michigan, and we're starting to just superficially. The concept of effectively pollution reduction as a public benefit, in the same way that that wastewater treatment or fixing the sidewalks are public benefit, and therefore basically being able to access. So in New York, this is something that they're working on, and I probably won't articulate it perfectly, but I'm learning about it. But effectively, in New York, they have Local Law 97, which is their building performance policy. It is driving incredible amounts of building decarbonization. If you all are not familiar with either the New York City Accelerator or the Building Energy Exchange, I would highly encourage looking at both of those resources. They're really excellent. But there they are trying to effectively leverage the city's ability to bond, or to take on debt. It might not be exactly bonds, to say, okay, if you are a building that is that is providing a public benefit vis-a-vis decarbonizing, which helps to reduce pollution, hence the public benefit, then you would be eligible to take advantage of money that is effectively coming out of a fund backed by bond or bond type capital. And therefore, now we're talking about hopefully loans getting into the 3-4% area, really low, ideally longer term loans that would sit with the building, because they're through the government. So it's this interesting sort of concept. Like, there's a little bit of pace, it feels like, type of concept in there. There's a little bit of the municipal leveraging their ability to bond. There's the local law is helpful. Something about a state law, which I know isn't really something it's a challenging time to get state laws passed in Michigan. But anyway, rambling a little bit now, but it's something we're exploring. And John, I think is an interesting application of that. But I'll also be talking at the Oakland County Sustainability Gathering, which is, I think, primarily aimed for the local towns and units of government within Oakland County in a couple weeks. So hopefully engaging more locals to explore this topic further.
We got a few minutes left. Does anybody have any additional questions or comments?
I have another question. I know that the state of Michigan's having a sustainability conference, I think, in 2 weeks in Grand Rapids. Are you on the agenda? Are they talking about some of the same things there?
I'm not on the agenda, but I'm not sure who it's. Yeah, I'm always I'm always a little confused about the sustainability conference versus the My Healthy Climate conference. For reference, I started the week of the My Healthy Climate conference. In fact, I did not take any days off between my job of 12 years and my new job, just so that I could attend that conference and meet the people that were there from a lot of these national coalitions. But no, I'm not going to. I'm familiar with the MISCON, but I'm not going to be there. And to some extent, I think I like these smaller gatherings, because I think capacity is still definitely a challenge, and we're working on building that out. But B, I still want to fine tune this thing that we're doing a little bit more, like I mentioned about, aggregating projects and how we're going to do that before I continue to present it to too many people in abstract, although I appreciate the socialization element of it. So I would encourage, like I said to all you, to at least follow along the LinkedIn page. Eventually we'll have a website, but we're hoping to start doing more programming as well, and possibly even having some more communications, even if it's something quarterly, that help to, again, socialize this idea of the work and what we're doing, and hopefully solicit additional thoughts and creative ideas like we've heard some tonight.
Hey, thank you, Ben, for making this presentation. It's reassuring to know that things are moving ahead despite all the kind of problems from Washington, D.C. And, that we're still kind of plugging away at these activities because so much needs to be done. Let me mention that next week, we're going to have a Detroit solar story. Diane Vuren is working on putting together a program to give us an update on the city's solar arrays. Some of you are probably aware that they're doing 5 kind of community solar arrays in the city of Detroit and have started construction on, I think, the first solar array. And then the week after, the Vehicle Grid Integration Council, their executive director is going to come to us and talk about vehicle to grid and vehicle to home, kind of what's happening in that area and what kind of policies need to be developed. Because that's something I know that has been of interest to a lot of people. What's going on with those all those batteries and all those electric vehicles? How can we take advantage of them for backup power for our homes, or maybe integrate them with the grid? So that'll be in 2 weeks, but next week will be Detroit Solar Story. And John, do you want to do another pitch for the annual meeting?
It's on November 15th, Saturday. Encourage everybody to attend. We're going to be doing a lot of brainstorming about strategies for 2026, which is why the presentation by Ben is spot on, because we need to figure out how we can recalibrate our marketing with the loss of the investment tax credit. And we want to talk to solar businesses about how they're going to pivot and how they're going to market it. And, we're facing challenging times, but I think as Ben laid out, there are a tremendous number of opportunities and there's a tremendous amount of momentum that's built up. And, we want to take this time on November 15th to celebrate the work we did this year and to plan for next year so we can hit the ground running. So I encourage everybody to come. It's a good chance to meet people with like-minded values, and it will be a lot of positive energy and just a lot of creativity being expressed. So I hope everybody can join us.
Thank you, John. And thanks again, Ben, for coming to kind of give us an update on your new job and the new efforts. So it is inspiring that things are still moving ahead. And so with that, I think I'll adjourn. We're after 8 o'clock. Thanks to everybody for coming, and hope to see you next Thursday. Take care.
Thanks, y'all. Have a good night.